Well, welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us here. We're going to be covering today a crash course in energy and water reporting and benchmarking in the province of Ontario. We put together a little bit of a webinar here in a presentation to lead some of you through it. We've been getting more and more questions about this lately as some of the legislation has changed this year, and we thought it'd be a really good idea to get some of our existing clients and anybody who might be interested in a little bit more information about what's needed here and what's changing in the requirements. First, just a little bit of background. I'm Justin Tudor. I'm the president of Keller Engineering. We are a multidisciplinary engineering firm focused on existing buildings, building envelope, structural, mechanical, electrical, and energy auditing. We've been providing EWRB services to clients in Ontario for the last 5 years since inception. We've been providing engineering services to the province of Ontario for the last 40 years. We're specialized in contextualizing and analyzing this data that is required in this program, and we're looking forward to showing you guys how we do it here. So, first of all, I'd like to just give a primer for people who don't know what the energy and water reporting and benchmarking is. I promise you that I'll get all this done in 30 minutes, and if there's any questions, you can throw them in the Q&A, and I'll hang around until they're all gone. So today we're going to jump into what the EWRB program is, how you or your building can report, and how our team does it. And so this all started with an Ontario regulation in December of 2018. The idea and the goal was that by July 2023, most privately owned buildings, which are greater than 50,000 square feet, would be reporting their annual energy and water consumption. This was done in a staggered approach, and most buildings in Ontario are now having to do it, most multi-unit buildings. So why are we doing this? What was the goal? It was to motivate corporations to compete with one another, to strive to improve their building's performance over year, allow property and financial markets to compare building performance, and show the benefit of investing in energy efficiency. I'm going to have some comments later that I think that's a little bit of a long road to get there, but it's a first step. So why are we doing this? The goal, we're going to save the planet. This is an incremental but important first step in addressing greenhouse gas emissions and how buildings and existing infrastructure play a part of it. Benchmarking itself is the idea, reporting and benchmarking is the idea of putting all your data in one place so it can be compared to others, and we can measure performance in that way. This program isn't the decarbonization efforts. It's not the major building overhauls that are going to be needed, but this is a way of looking at where we are, creating the baseline for all this so that these programs can be implemented in a better way. So what does it mean? What do we have to do? What is the reporting requirements? First is that you have to keep your building information up to date so that you can report. Those are your keys to getting reporting done. It's important to remember that this is a legislation, so it's a requirement. There's no real getting out of it. You're then going to be reporting how much your buildings use for water, electricity, and gas, and some other services to the Ministry of Energy. You're going to have to conduct an independent audit of the data to verify that it's accurate for the first year and every 5 years thereafter on most buildings. And then you're going to have to report that data through the Energy Star portfolio online to the government of Ontario. So which buildings must report? As I mentioned, it was a phased-in process. This has been happening over the last 5 years with varying requirements over the years. You have to report by July 1st for your last year's building data. And this year, in July 2023, is the first year that 50,000 square foot buildings come online. Now, this represents a majority of the multi-unit residential buildings in our province. So they're expecting that the cohort of reporting buildings to double this year at the very least, just by the inclusion of these smaller buildings. So do we have to do it? This is something we get all the time. And there are very limited exceptions to this legislation and they're spelled out in the Act. First one is the government's never going to follow rules that they create themselves. So if you're renting out your building to more than 50% of a public agency, you don't have to report. If the next one is if you are more than 10% a data center or a TV studio or a trading floor, you don't have to report. If you're more than 10% a manufacturing, commercial, agricultural, or industrial processing, that you don't have to report. The idea is that if you're a building that makes widgets and dyes, massive energy usage is a part of your business anyways, and it's not necessarily a part of operating your building specifically. And then the other one is newly constructed in that reporting year. So a brand new building that was built in August of this year doesn't have to report this year's data. You effectively need a full year's of data to report. A little comment about townhouse complexes that we've encountered. The general idea here is it's a building. So you're reporting if you're one building. If you have a site with two buildings over this threshold, there's likely going to be requiring 2 building reports. There's some exclusions for that you might be able to report as one building, but mostly per building, per report. But townhouses, certainly in Toronto area, you can envision some townhouse blocks that are requiring, that would go over 50,000 square feet. If your rule of thumb on high-rise units is 1,000 square feet per unit, any building over 50 might need it. But on townhouses, it can get a little more trickier. Bigger units and blocks can vary in size. But generally speaking, if your townhouse block is less than 50,000 square feet, unless your townhouse is over 50,000 square feet, those blocks don't count either. Verification of data. It's not for all buildings. It's for buildings over 100,000 square feet only. It can be done by your in-house professional. So if you have the legislation as we read it, if you have a building staff who knows the energy and can check every bill and feel really confident about it, then that person would qualify as a verifier. They've also set out a list of types of qualified professionals and accredited professionals. These are the lists that you'd expect: professional engineers, building energy technologists, building operations technologies, building science specialists. Those types of people are allowed to verify the data as well. Verifying the legislation is a little loose, but what we understand it to mean is to confirm the gross floor area, the information on the building, and the data is that's put in is the best case scenario of the data that you have. What's the big promise here? What's the promise of benchmarking? Is that every building is going to be able to save money by tracking their energy usage if they're not doing it. Certainly, if we think about larger portfolios of commercial properties, they have a lot of dedicated energy managers, or residential portfolios in Toronto with a lot of footprints in buildings. They might have dedicated energy managers, but mostly buildings, a lot of them are out there on their own. And although they're tracking how much they're spending on their bills, they're not necessarily tracking usage year over year. So this will allow the identification to save money and track usage. Next is that you're going to identify energy and water efficiency opportunities. Certainly as the buildings age, you'll be able to see if these energy intensity numbers are going up. And then you're going to be able to compare them to regional neighbors. So we'll see it all the time. 2 almost identical buildings go up almost identical years, and then they have drastically different energy usage and water usage. Knowing that your neighbor is the same as you, but is saving a lot more money, it certainly is incentivizing owners into thinking about how they can decrease their energy costs and therefore improve the planet. This information is hopefully going to be used by cities and municipalities as well to help push some of this data out for proactive reductions. So the cities are really talking about using this data to help align your buildings and your buildings' needs with some of the programs that are being put out there and money that might be put aside to help improve your buildings. We're going to talk a little bit more about the cities and municipalities' roles in a little bit here, but I promise you, you can do this yourself. It's not pretty, but everybody knows that there's that one. You might have a student sitting in your office who can handle this, or you might have, if you're looking at a condominium board with a real diehard ex-electrical engineer board member who really wants to take this on themselves. They can do this. The legislation is built so that this isn't supposed to be impossible. Furthermore, there's guides online that can really help you walk through this. It's there are three major steps towards how this is done, and I've laid them out here. Your first headline, though, is to make sure you're required. So you really need to make sure you qualify for this, because there's certainly a lot of buildings that will get notices and that they have to provide their data. And when we look at it, we figure out they're exempt, and then we have to file on that exemption. So really put yourself in the camp of figuring out whether this actually applies to you and your buildings or not. Next thing you're going to do is going to have to collect the data. You're going to verify that data, and you're going to report it in. We'll go through those steps here. First thing that happens, mostly that triggers this, is an EWRB letter goes out to building owners, indicating that, telling them about the legislation, tell them they have to look it up here and get moving on submitting. This comes out every year. The letters, if you've submitted in the past, there are emails, and they actually came out this morning. So if you've submitted in the past, you might have got an email this morning, or whomever submitted for you. On this EWRB letter, there's your contact info and your EWRB number, which is kind of your portal to figuring out everything hereafter. It's important to remember too, they've cast a wide net. Some buildings are going to be exempt that are going to get this letter. So just because you have it doesn't necessarily mean you need to do it. So keep in mind those exemptions up there. The other thing that I really like to point out here is that the ministry hasn't quite figured out condominiums yet. When these letters first went out, they would show up just in lobbies of condominiums, unaddressed to any unit. We saw a few that were addressed to unit 101 of a condominium. So it's not fully known how these are going out when they're mailed out. But getting your EWRB number is nowhere near as hard as it used to be. You can call them up at the EWRB program, and they'll give you one, or you can email their support line, which is also very helpful. If you're doing it yourself too, you also need to know how big your building is, because you need to compare it to your adjacent property. So that can, if you're a high rise with more square feet than the other, that's going to be important in measuring energy intensity. How you can get that data, the first thing we do is always recommend people go to the architectural drawings. Usually on the first page, there's what's called an architectural matrix that can tell you your gross floor area and your parking area. And those are the two key metrics you're going to need for your building information. You can also get this gross floor area typically from insurance assessments. It's usually right there on page 1 or page 2, and it'll break out the parking. So there's an easy way to get information there. Then you got to figure out, there's two ways you're going to gather all the usage information. So determining how much energy or water or gas your building used, always you can look at the bills. And you're going to have to put in this data ultimately on a per month basis. So if you have all the bills, you can make this happen. You need 13 bills because often you never get your bill on January 1st and it ends on December 31st, and you're going to have to put all of that data in. So if you have all those bills, that's the best way, that's a way to do it. The other option, and the more common one, is the utility requests. So this is part of the program, was also setting up all the utilities providers in Ontario, that they're going to have to respond to these requests for data. People might not have all their bills. People might not have the information that they need to request on their own. So they have to be able to go through these, get the information anew from the utilities. Every utility is different. We work with 29 different utilities across the province to get this data, and I can tell you it varies significantly. There's some energies, like I think of Hydro One or London Hydro, they can be confused. They all have different processes. Some have websites that you make your requests into. Some have forms that you must email. Some want just the account number of your utility. Some want the address of the property. Some take 2 days to get back to you. Some take 3 months to get back to you. Some will be answered by computer. Some will be answered by Minnie in London, who's very nice and can help you through it. She's just a little slow at giving you the data. Some give you very good data, and some give you data with some holes in it. Some will let you request as early as February. Some won't take requests until March. So it's a bit of a grab bag. But if you're only looking at your one building, it's not impossible. You can put it all, you can have a look at it, and you're only looking at 3 utilities. You can figure out on that company's website how they recommend how to make your requests. What you get back is very different from each building. This is the Durham Region Water. They sent a letter with just the months that they had data on. Ottawa Hydro sent a 335 line spreadsheet, of which in this spreadsheet 12 numbers are important. So we had to interpret that. Every utility gives you back something differently. Interpreting the data too is the next step. So you have to have a look. If you only got your meter read every other month, you know you're going to have to put that data in a monthly basis. So you're going to have to spread that out. Enbridge is particularly good at leaving out holes of months of data. So you have to go through the EWRB guidelines and figure out how to fill in those holes to put the data into the portfolio. So you've got it. You've got all your building data. You've got your square footage, and you've got all your information from the bills. Then you got to get it to the government. And it's not just throwing it in an envelope and filling out a form. They're using the Energy Star Portfolio Manager online, and it's a super strong tool. There's a lot of tutorials for how to do it. And I promised everybody I would show them how to do it. And this next section is kind of how the sausage gets made. It's about to get pretty dull for like 2 or 3 slides, but I will show you how to use this software very briefly. It's a little more, it's not as easy as creating an Amazon account, but it's not as hard as filing your taxes. So it's pretty accessible here. And as I mentioned, there's guides to using this program that takes your data and submits it to the government. First, you just need to create an account. It's pretty straightforward from there. Then from your account, you can have multiple properties. And you create a property by just effectively adding its address, selecting its property type that you get from the MPAC assessment, and then effectively establishing what you're doing for that property. So for this, it'd be for EWRB reporting mostly. Energy Star Portfolio is a tool that a lot of buildings already use for monitoring energy usage. If you're on a BOMA building, you're using Energy Star Portfolio Manager already. And this is a tool just used to track building usage and information. From there, you're going to add a new meter for every one of your utilities, be it water, gas, energy, or some utilities where some of the energy you have to report is steam, or if there's a centralized water, hot and cold water plant, you'll have to pull in their bills as well. You add in the meters, you create your building's meter information, and then you need to start putting in the data. As I mentioned, no matter how you get the data, some data comes in day by day, you need to put it in a monthly fashion. So you need to aggregate it and make some reasonable interpretations on the data to get it in here. So you have all your data, you've put it into the Energy Star Portfolio, and then you need to verify it. As a verifier, I wish it was harder, but to say that I wish there was a letter, I wish there was something. No, verifying the data, you check a box, you say it was verified, and that's the whole story. I expect that to change in the next couple of years, because what's the point of verifying if it's just checking a box? But we'll see how that goes. At this point here too, you're going to be able to enroll in the City of Toronto or the City of Ottawa's voluntary program. This voluntary program, you're going to hear a lot more of it over the next couple of months. It gives better reporting back to you than the municipality is going to do. Than the province is doing. The trade-off is that your data becomes publicly available. Not in the anonymized fashion as we understand it, but we're encouraging all our clients to go through the reporting process. The tools and the benchmarking reports that they're giving out are really high quality, and we're hoping everybody will start using them as well. Then you submit your data. You click a button, you say, create my report, submit it to the ministry. And then you know what you get after that? It's not a certificate of completion. It's not anything saying good job. It's not information on your building. You get an email that says you submitted it. And really, that's all. So I think there's a long way for when we talk about the promise of energy usage, there's a long way for it to go before we can get all our information out there. So you can get the data though. You can get the data online. You go to data.ontario.ca and it will give you can download the file. It'll give you a 3,000 line spreadsheet where you can find your anonymized EWRB number in there, and then you can go and find out your two energy intensity usages. They're easily labeled with site EW1 or EU1 and site WEW2. Super easy to understand. Also, then, if you feel compelled, you can compare it to your neighboring buildings by filtering by postal code, scrolling down 4,000 lines and finding out where they all are. If you want to know other neighbors, of course, you'll have to look at more places in the spreadsheet. And if you are in a big enough neighborhood with big enough reporting, you'll have to look at a lot of spreadsheets. And it's just that easy. That's why we think we can do it better. So as much as we feel that that it's a process for a building, and if you're engaged in this, you can go through the process and the motions. We do this for a lot of clients. We're doing over 400 already, and it's something that we really put the full process into. We break it down into two phases: the initial service and setup, and the ongoing data verification. The key thing here is that we want to gather all the information as early as possible so that we don't have to disrupt the managers or the building owners thereafter. We then look to make multi-year agreements so that we can start on your reporting before you even get the letter. As I mentioned, we have 25% of our submittals for data requests have already gone out, and today is the day that they started reminding people to do this. Our structure steps are pretty straightforward. We gather all the owner information from the owners, and we get the building characteristics, and then we take it from there. From there, we're going to identify if you're exempt. We're going to register your building with the Energy Star portfolio. We're going to go through all the data and make sure we get the right areas. We're going to gather all the information from utilities, correspond with them, because Minnie in London, you have to talk to her a bunch of times back and forth to get the right data sometimes. And we're going to do all that corresponding. We're going to verify the data every year, whether you need it or not, or whether you're 50,000 square feet, 100,000 square feet or not. And then we're going to report that back to the provider, the province rather. What we need an agreement, a letter of authorization, and a single utility bill from any year. It doesn't even have to be all 13. We're going to take your insurance appraisal, and that'll create our building data. We're going to do exactly what we told you to do there too. We're going to do a bulk utility request, and we're going to validate the data. What we don't do is bother the engineer, the building owners. Once we get that information, it's very unlikely that we're going to have to come back to you to report. By setting it up as a year-over-year approach, we'll only come back to you every year with the information, or through our reporting, any interesting savings opportunities we think are there. We're going to give you a confirmation of submittal and a report, and our tailored report as well. So as I mentioned, it's not rocket science, but we do a lot of these. So our first step and the process, we have a mechanical engineer leading a bunch of junior engineers who for the next 3 months, all they're going to do is utility requests and data interpretations. And it is a little, as I mentioned, it's a little dull. But after it's done, that's when the real work starts, and we hand over to the mechanical engineer. From there, we go into the data that's published for the entire province as well, not just the buildings that we work with. And we're going to create a tailored report for you that gives you some interesting information that's not yet available at the provincial level. From this report is going to identify a few things. One, it's going to contextualize your data, and we're going to try and proactively assist you in improvements or monitoring programs. First thing we're going to look at, we're going to compare your year-over-year usage by month of energy and natural gas. This can show you if there's any major changes in your trends, and we're going to be pointing out any historical modifications. This doesn't, to note too, if you've submitted EWRB in the past, but you haven't done it with Keller, we can still get this data in the anonymized fashion. We're going to look at the water and do the exact same thing. There's certainly we can look at some of these graphs and see a very interesting spike around COVID when everybody started staying home in 2020. And it's fun to get a little bit more contextualization of this data. And the last and most important thing we give you in the report is we use it to compare where you are to the buildings in your region. So by going through that 3,000 item spreadsheet, we're able to tell you your energy usage based off your type of building in your geographic region. And once again, this isn't just the ones that Keller worked with, this is everybody who's submitted, comparing to last year's data. So it's July 1st is the day to submit. As I mentioned, whether you're doing it with us or you're doing it on your own, it's important to get started now, because you have to put all the bills together. And if you're going to utility requests, some of them are still taking 3 months, and some of that data interpretation can take a fair bit of time. So we encourage you to get going on it. If you are looking for our help, our pricing is capped at $500 a reporting period, but a lot of buildings that comes down based off the circumstances and what data they're able to provide us. We really encourage that you reach out to our team at EWRB at kellerengineering.com, because we got a bunch of really excited people to sit here and do data entry for the next 3 months. Thank you very much. I think I kept it almost to time. I did it. I'll answer a few questions here directly on the chat, but if anybody needs to jump off, thanks for coming. And if you have any questions, please email us, EWRB@kellerengineering.com, or reach out to me directly. Questions that we're getting. To clarify, buildings over 50,000 square feet are required to start with this as of July 1st, 2023. Is that for the 2022-2023 year or for next year? Great question. So as of this year, July 1st, 2023, you have to report all of your data for last year. So any building over 50,000 square feet, you have to start reporting this year. That's why we're talking now, so that you can get moving on it. I have a corporation with 5 blocks ranging from 7,000 to 16,000 square feet. And there is a total of 5 buildings at 59,000 square feet. Do I report? They would only have water and little common hydro. Units pay their own. So great news here. We don't see this as a reporting building. We've read the legislation everywhere. They don't really take into account, I think this is for a condominium. They're not looking at that type of major structure. They're looking at townhouse blocks. So if you have a townhouse block that's over 50,000 square feet, that would trigger it, but not in your case here. Another thing to think about here too is that I think the legislation is smart about this, in that there's not a lot of benefit on the high level of townhouses reporting and being able to do anything with the reporting information. As our colleague mentioned here, units pay their own utilities, and if you're aggregating even a big townhouse block of 50,000 units, if it's 50 different unit owners who are responsible for their furnace changes, it's a little bit different approach than you might have in a high rise, where you can maybe aggregate some of that. How can we find out the total square feet in our building is at the 50,000 total requirement for reporting? So there's always the rule of thumb. If you're in a high rise and you're over 50,000 square feet, you're probably pretty close, because it counts in common areas as well. So it's important to consider that too. If you're not, you can always look at those 2 resources that I identified as well. Your architectural drawings can list right on the front page what your square footage is for the blocks, or your insurance appraisal will often list it early on as well. My Zoom crashed partway through. Were you able to send out the slides? We won't be sending the slides out, but we will be putting this presentation on our website under the resources tab. So I think we'll have information on who signed up, but if not, look on our website. Also, we'll be putting that on our social media too, so you can watch for it there. If you found out about this through that, you can find it there as well. Somebody said, thank you. You are welcome. What is the cost for the service for 50,000 square foot property? As I mentioned, we're capped out. We don't provide, we don't charge more than $500 for any one building, and that decreases depending on factors within the building. Thanks, Justin. Great info. I agree. This is a legislative requirement. Every building's going to have to do it. There's no enforcement police just yet, but the type of data that we're able to provide, and that it looks like the city municipalities are going to be able to provide, is something that the building owners can use right now and really benefit from the benchmarking program. I have a condo with 3 phases, 10,000 square feet, 23,000 square feet, and 23,400 square feet. Do they require EWRB? Provided the phases are different blocks entirely, no, they don't. I think we might have got all the questions here. Nobody hiding out in chat, which is always a pleasant thing. Well, we ran 1 minute late. I told you we could do it in 30 minutes. there's a lot of information here. But if you have any questions, please reach out to me or to my colleague Andre Ball or to EWRB@kellerengineering.com. And we'd be happy to provide you with a little bit more information or provide you with a proposal for service. Thank you very much.